Hi there, welcome to another episode of Rebel Rock Money Talk. I'm your host, Leslie Batson, and today I'm joined by a guest. I have with me Andres Mazabel. Hi, Andres, how are you?
Hi, Leslie. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, glad you could join me. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about, well, a lot about a topic that some people like to avoid, but when you talk with me, I like to bring it up. I know it can sometimes be uncomfortable, but it's one of those discussions that we all need to have. And it's all around the topic of estate planning. It's making sure that we have our affairs in order, we have our wishes documented. So when we do pass away, because remember, this is not an if event, we are all going to pass away at some point, and we really want to make sure that we have documented and captured what our wishes are, not just for our financial assets, but for our loved ones, for the causes we care about, our pets. There's so many other things that we want to make sure that we have captured what our wishes are so that those who our loved ones can carry out those wishes for us or our executor, etc. So Andres is joining us from a company called Trust and Will. And I invited him to speak with us today just to share a little bit about what their company offers because I think it's a great service and something that I want more people to know about. So, Andres, welcome again.
Absolutely. Thanks again. I'm super grateful to be here and excited for the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I kind of touched on, I often when I meet with new prospects or just when I meet with clients, one of the things I like to ask them is, do they have a will or a trust in place? And unfortunately, I would say nine, maybe eight times out of 10, they do not. Or if they
Yeah.
do have something in place, they haven't updated it in years. Their assets have changed, their family dynamics have changed, they have more kids, or something has changed, or they have a new business or something like that, and they've not made those updates. But there are also those who, they don't have any will or any type of trust, any type of estate planning in place at
In
all.
place.
And I think they feel a little overwhelmed in just, where would I even begin? Because I think for some of them, they think, well, I don't necessarily have a whole lot, or they have assets, but they don't feel like it's very complicated. Um, and some of them, they just haven't really taken the time to think about it. So I would love for you
Totally.
to just share with us a little bit about what Trust and Will is, like the company, what it offers, and how you can help people who don't currently have a will or a trust in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, I love that as an advisor, you're bringing up the conversation of estate planning. It's
Mhm.
such an important part of your client's full financial picture, right?
Yeah.
And before we kind of go into the trust and will and what we offer, this is something I saw. So I was in private banking for about 13 years, and very similar to the conversations that you're having is,
Hmm.
do you have an estate plan in place? And most of the time, people are like, I know I need to get it done,
Yeah.
but there are so many barriers for people to be proactive and actually get it done. One, many people just don't like talking about death or facing death, right?
Right.
And as you said it perfectly, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of, or no, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? And then two, when it comes to estate planning, I believe there's a big lack of education. And that's something that Trust and Will is really helping educate people better when it comes to, when should I start thinking about an estate plan?
Hmm.
What are my options? And then more importantly, how do I actually get it done? See, for most people, the perception is great. Gosh, if I need to create an estate plan, it's going to cost me a couple $1,000s. And many people that are just starting a family, buying their first home, they might be one on a budget that they're kind of sticking to, but then two, the whole thought process of like going to an attorney, going through that process is can be overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
And usually they end up putting it off, right? Like there's 60% of families, including parents that don't have that aren't, parents that have kids under the age of 18, they don't have any planning in place, right?
Hmm.
So when we looked at the market, I'll kind of switch and start giving you a little bit of background, but Trust and Will started about 3.5 years ago. And we're a venture backed company. We've raised close to about $24 million. And that is a big, and it's a very big problem that we're looking to solve,
Hmm.
is how can we make estate planning more accessible to more people nationwide? And two is provide the resources so that the average American that, isn't worth $5 million or isn't worth $3 million is actually being proactive about having a plan in place,
Right.
right? Because the misconceptions that you should only think about estate planning if you're worth millions of dollars
Right.
or things like that, it's very, very inaccurate. So that's kind of the problem that we're helping solve. And if you think about it, Leslie, the approach that we've done is kind of like a TurboTax, but
Hmm.
for estate planning,
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, who's using TurboTax? Well, usually you're W-2, you don't have a very complicated tax return, and you just need a simple, easy way that it kind of helps guide you through the process. So what do we offer? We offer state specific plans. Everything we do is state specific, right?
Hmm.
That's the beauty of the US, is every state has its own regulations and laws. So we have legal staff that is creating and updating all the documents. And then from there, we're really just delivering and helping clients go through the process one question at a time.
Hmm.
And even before they start, they take like this questionnaire, if you will,
Hmm.
to help someone determine what is the best fit for them. Because when you sometimes ask someone about an estate plan, it's like, well, gosh, aren't there a million questions or options for me?
Yeah.
Yes, for someone that's very advanced and very high net worth, absolutely. There's more advanced planning. But for someone like me, hey, it's either a trust or a will. It just depends on my assets. Do I have kids? How
Hmm.
do I want to distribute my assets to my kids? So I can go on and on, but it's simplifying what's typically perceived as a very, very complicated process is something that we're delivering online. But what's also really, really nice is we help people walk through the process. If they have questions, you're able to chat in, you can pick up the phone and talk to someone. So that is something that is incredibly important, is complementing the website with the live member support that we have 7 days a week.
Yes, that's a great overview. So you touched on a few things that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. So you touched on wills and trust, and that's obviously the name of the company. But can you just at a high level give like explain to people what is the difference between a will and a trust, and why would perhaps one person need a will and others need a trust?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the big difference, and I can go into this, but the why behind it
Hmm.
is so important.
Hmm.
And really at the end of the day is if something is to happen to you unexpectedly, is what type of situation is are you leaving your family behind in, right? Where they have no access to your accounts or there are no beneficiaries, or this is a really tough conversation to have, but it has to be, you have to have this conversation with your loved ones.
Hmm.
If I have younger kids under the age of 18, something happens to me, unexpectedly, because life happens.
Yeah.
What physically happens to your children if a parent or a guardian isn't there? Literally, a judge is going to then assign a legal guardian for your children. So how can we be more proactive about making those decisions ahead of time to not put our kids and loved ones in a very tough situation? And that's where estate planning comes into place, right? So will is, kind of think about it as your foundational, most basic type of estate planning. It's a legal document, and it helps outline, these are the assets that I have, and when I pass, this is who I want to receive my assets. We also include you talked about pet guardianships, also for children. Very important is, if something happens, my kid isn't 18 yet, who is going to be the legal guardian of my children.
Mhm.
So that's the most basic type of estate plan is a will. And then obviously in any plan always have a power of attorney, your living will, the healthcare directive. So that's something that we always offer. And then the trust option starts coming into play really when someone wants to make sure that their estate is avoiding probate. So a trust, think of it as its own entity, and it's essentially it's a legal plan that helps outline when and how my assets are distributed. So a big difference with the trust is you actually have a lot more control. Is if you have a $250,000 life insurance policy and you have an investment account, well, do you really want a 17-year-old to receive all those assets at once? Or would you rather kind of stagger it out so that they're receiving it at 25, 30, 35, and we give clients a flexibility to kind of pick and choose what they think is best for their families, because every family is a little bit differently. So in essence, the trust is allowing someone to have much more control, avoid probate, so a judge isn't really involved in making those decisions whatsoever. And your question is great. Well, when should you kind of start thinking about which one is best for you? We have a ton of resources around that. We have a quiz, we have some really good educational content, and then we have member support. But really, at the end of the day, high level overview, it just depends on the assets and what type of bucket they fall under.
Got it.
An example, California, probate is miserable. It can take over 12 months and it's very expensive. So many people that own a home, even a condo, real estate's one of your biggest assets. So
Mhm.
anytime you're looking at you have real estate, that's where trust can come into play.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Two is the level of assets outside of your real estate, either in an investment account, in a savings account, whatever the case might be, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And then three, really children, I think are a big factor in saying, great, well, how and when do I want to distribute the assets to my children?
Yes. No, you touched on some great things there. And I want to also add that, more and more we're seeing that we have people who are, starting to take care of their parents, right? So
Yes.
the irony is we are starting to live longer, right? Not starting. I mean, we are living longer. So we're living to, older ages. And sometimes our loved ones, our parents or our grandparents, they're not able to really afford to continue to take care of themselves on their own. So they end up moving in with us. So now you are the caretaker, or you have another dependent. You may have children and you may also have a parent that you're taking care of. What would happen if you were to pass away? What type of care would you want to happen to your parent? Not only just your children, but now that parent or that loved one. Or the other situation I see coming up more frequently is if you have a special needs child.
Yeah.
You definitely want to make sure that you have taken care of or made arrangements for them in the event that you're no longer here, or even if you get incapacitated in some way, right? All of those wishes will be outlined in your will and or your trust. If you're a business owner, you want to make sure that you have identified, you've made it clear what you want to happen in your, in your trust or in your will. You will obviously have maybe specific documents that pertain to your for the business. So you might have, for example, a buy sell agreement. I think we've talked about this
Yeah.
before, but a buy sell agreement is something, it's the legal agreement that you would put in place if you have business partners. And what this does is it identifies, it makes very clear what happens in the event that one of you passes away. So let's say I have a business partner named Joe. We have a buy sell agreement put together, and it outlines what happens in the event that I become disabled. It outlines what happens when I pass away, and we fund it using life insurance. So if Joe were to pass away, I don't necessarily want to become business partners with his wife. We have made very clear in our buy sell agreement what the terms are, and essentially that life insurance will kick in. I will be able to purchase his, part of the business. So his family will get, their equity, their part of that business, and I can, move forward with that ownership. So there's all these different elements, but you want to make sure that you've discussed all these elements and that they're documented somewhere and that they are part of. So again, if there's life insurance involved or anything like that, these are all, at least involved in the trust in some way, so that when you do pass away, your loved ones know exactly what is supposed to happen. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and this all of this just goes to explain why it's important to not put off talking about estate planning. So whether you're single or you're a young couple or an older couple, to me, I feel like there's never a wrong time to start talking about it, right?
Totally.
And it's something that evolves, right? So you mentioned that Trust and Will, it's a website, and it has like a wizard. It walks you through the whole process, of how to create your will and or your trust. But this is something that even once it's completed and put together, you can return to and you can make updates to. They have, attorneys. They have people who you can reach out to if you have a specific question, and they are licensed in your state, so they can answer a question specific to your state. I oftentimes have people come to me and say, "Oh, I have a will that I got off of got online, or I went to this particular website and downloaded a template." I'm like, I think that's a good place to start, but I would not use that as your actual legal document, right? It's a good place for you to look at to start thinking about, ooh, what are all the things I should be thinking about? But really, you could go to a site like Trust and Will, that will ask you all the questions, walk you through, and help you make sure that you are putting together something that's comprehensive.
Yeah.
Um, and it can live with you as your life changes, as new kids, or just as your life changes, your plan can evolve along with it. So I think it's a great service that Trust and Will is offering in this scenario.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, and with that said, is like a couple really important points that you brought up. So we've helped in about 3.5 years, close to 200,000 families. And we have two buckets, right? We have the buckets of bucket one is like the 33 to 55-year-old demographic. And as you mentioned, we have people that are coming in and creating their first will for the first time. But after that, they got married, they had their first child, and they actually bought their first home. So that's something that you said it perfectly, is an actual estate plan that reflects your life as it changes and evolves and it grows. Because many people, like when I was in banking, I would set up trust accounts all the time. And I don't know, maybe 7 times out of 10, it's like if they actually had a plan in place, which is rare, as you've seen,
Yeah.
is Andreas, I need to reach out to my attorney and update it. It's totally updated, right? So what is the point of having a plan that you pay $1,000 for if you're not fully being proactive about, updating it? So as you mentioned, we've essentially allowed clients to be more proactive about, hey, it's actually very simple and very easy for me to go online, make an update to the plan, and you have that peace of mind. If you move states, if you whatever the case might be. And then the second point I was going to bring up in terms of the second bucket, definitely the caregivers. You said it perfectly. We're living longer, right? We're now like there's so many of us that are now like starting to enter this stage in life of like, what is like my parents' life look like after they're retired? Many have a plan, many don't, right? So how can we be better educated to say, hey, mom, dad, do you have a plan in place? Like what's going to happen when you pass?
Yeah.
And that's where we've seen that kind of second bucket of very proactive people that are coming in and say, hey, I'm actually now in a caregiver role, and my parents have no plan in place.
Yeah,
So
for
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah, and especially when we've kind of just lived through, well, we're hopefully getting over this
Yeah,
period of
I
COVID.
know. Yeah.
A lot of people, I mean, I think that's where, it was just, I think 2020, and here we are still now in 2021, but a lot of people have started to think about like the what ifs. What if some type of illness or something came over you so quickly and you were gone like that? Is your family ready? It's enough emotionally to deal with the sudden loss of a loved one, but then if you have to now think about, I just tell people, think of the emotional investment that's required after someone passes away, whether it was
Yeah.
un, you know, uh, like we knew it was coming or not, right? There is just this whole emotional period that you have to go through, and you're trying to think of like how I'm gonna now I got to set up this funeral or this service. Now I got to figure out how to pay for this service. I got to figure out this. I got to figure out that. Like, do you really want your spouse or your kids to be dealing with all that? Like, it's just a lot. And if the person did pass away suddenly, it could be really months of potentially just anxiety. It could be depression, some fear, and they may not be ready to
Yeah.
go back to work right away. Right? It's like
Totally.
it's one of the reasons I tell people life insurance is not just about making sure that your kids can go to school in the event that you pass away. What if your spouse needs a few months to just reset? The whole family now has to get into a whole new routine. You're no longer there, and your spouse now might need to bring on a housekeeper or a caregiver to help with the kids because they have to maybe now go back out to work. But maybe they're not ready to go to work right away. Maybe they just need a few months to just reset. Maybe they're going
Yeah.
to decide to sell and move closer to their parent. Like, there's all kinds of things that happen, and you want to make sure that you have life insurance in place, but you also want to have these kind of documents in place so that really, like I said before, that your wishes are captured and can be
Yes.
implemented. But also, you want to make sure that you are optimizing. I like to use the word optimizing your tax consequences, right? Because again, if you are high net worth or in a position where you were to pass away suddenly, if your finances aren't in such a place where you can be protected, this could be a costly event for your family's life. So you really just want to have a will and or trust in place. Make sure you have life insurance in place, and make sure you talk to a professional about your finances.
Yeah, that is so spot on. I think so, like so much of our life, Leslie, I think is around all these goals and aspirations that we have, which is around, growing a family, buying a home, what does retirement look like? That's amazing. Like that is like we all can define our own lives and what that looks like. What fulfills your bucket? What are my priorities? But a lot of times we just forget to plan for the unexpected.
Right.
Not the death is unexpected because, like you said, we will all eventually pass. But how can we just have that buffer so that when it does happen, as you mentioned, outside of the emotional side of it, I don't know, Bless, if you've personally ever had a client go through probates or something like that, but
Not
it's an
yet.
extremely, I mean, I would set up estate accounts at the bank. And as I mentioned, California is a little bit more complex than others, but still,
Mhm.
you're now looking at, assets that are tied in an estate account until the judge approves the whole process. And I
Mhm.
promise you, it's not simple. So we talk about this every day. This is like, and this is why everyone on the team is so driven by what we do because it has a huge impact. The impact is providing peace of mind. We talk about it almost daily, but an estate plan is one of the best gifts you can leave behind to a family
Yep.
because of the worst thing that can happen is someone that has no idea where the bank accounts are.
Right.
They're on the accounts, but they have no idea how to access them, how the bills are paid.
Yeah.
Right? And like how frantic would you feel if you had to suddenly be like, I'm in charge, but I have no idea what and how and like what do I do? So
Yeah.
having these tough conversations, not just about an estate plan, but like where are your finances? How do we pay the bills, right? Like making sure everyone's kind of on the same page is so crucial.
Yeah.
And as you work with clients and as people are working with other finance professionals, is empowering everyone in the family to be involved in these conversations. And then
Absolutely.
also, I'm personally super passionate about as soon as you think your kids start to understand money, start talking about it. See, because I personally believe in, not to get sidetracked, but I personally believe that in our society, we have a problem that most people aren't being educated about finances. If your parents didn't instill that in you at a young age, it's
Right.
rarely talked about in middle school or even high school. At college, I would argue that it depends on your major and what you're kind of specializing in. But what I'm getting to is it's a conversation that we need to have at a younger age to empower young people to know what their options are and to start making decisions sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, there's a complete lack of financial education, in this country. And unfortunately, commercials get interpreted as education. So
Yeah,
if you see something, marketed or advertised often enough, then you're thinking, oh, that's what I should be doing. But it's still only going to be part of the puzzle. You really need to, you know, be intentional and active in learning, and as I always say, the whole story, the whole truth about money. Um, and I think that you touched on another really important thing is probate. The process itself is just very taxing from a time perspective. And a lot of people, I think, they don't realize it. They are aware of the concept of probate, but they are not
yeah,
aware of the time that it takes. And I know you mentioned California, but it can be like that in several states where it could be months before a will or an estate can be settled by a probate court. If you have not assigned someone to be the executor of your will, then the state is going to assign someone, and they're going to make decisions about your children
totally.
or your loved ones. And it's just something where you can just be the greatest expression of love is to have your estate in order so that
I
your
love
loved
that.
ones do
That
not
is so
have to take care of
powerful.
that. Yes, I feel like there's just nothing more important. And I know of people who've said that they've tried to have the conversation with their parents, and the parents like, nope, I don't want to talk about it. And it breaks my heart because I think it is going to be so painful when it is time when they do pass away, because they don't know where their parents' bank accounts are, and all those different things. And the parent is just like, they don't care. So
Totally.
um I hope you will not be that person, right? I hope that if you're listening to this message that you will just say, you know what, I'm going to invest a little bit of time to just start to put together the things that are important to me for my loved ones to have. I don't want it to go to the state or just be lost money, which is, if you ever see those, once a year your state will say, "Hey, we have money, like see if you've got money." Well, that's part of what it is unclaimed money, because it's money that's sitting in a bank account because maybe the person passed away and they didn't know who it was supposed to go to. So there's
Totally.
all kinds of
Totally.
different situations where, this is really important. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
there's
go ahead.
there's so many people that if you have conversations about estate planning, the ones that have one, many times they've actually unfortunately experienced probate through someone that they know or have
Yes.
heard about it.
Hmm.
And it's unfortunate because it's like we don't want every single person to have to experience it for them to be proactive about it for themselves or for someone else, right? So
Right.
that's like the mission that we're after is making estate planning accessible to everyone, that it's not just through an attorney, because
Right.
attorneys do a great job, but the average American doesn't need an attorney. Their situation for most people is very basic, very straightforward.
Hmm.
And then one more point that I would drive is also remember estate planning is not always about death.
Right.
Life happens, car accidents can happen, situations happen in life. We've
Hmm.
all heard of really crazy stories. So having your power of attorney, right? If you have your own accounts or whatever the case might be, who else can access those? Or a financial power of attorney. If last year taught us anything is we don't really have control of everything that's going to happen.
Hmm.
As
Yes.
much as humans, we love to have control over what's going to happen and know exactly. It just doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
having a healthcare directive, which is something that we everything we do is comprehensive. So everything's included, but healthcare directive, it's if you're in a coma, a ventilator, take away that decision out of a loved one of how long you should be on life support. It's
Right.
a very, very hard decision. So my point is it's not just about death. Life will happen. And we want to make sure that we have this like blanket peace of mind that it's like, hey, whatever life is going to throw at me, I'm prepared and my family is prepared to face it because we have a plan in place.
Absolutely. And I'll just add as one final thought that we've talked a lot about families and couples, that kind of thing. But if you are single, you absolutely need to have a will and or trust in place. And single without kids, right? It's not just about, oh, who am I going to leave my money to, that kind of thing, or am I going to leave it to my kids? If you're very passionate about certain causes, maybe you have nieces, nephews, you know, maybe you like, if you have specific people who you want to leave your assets to, this is how you make sure it's documented and executed. Excuse me, because um, too often we think of some of these practices like estate planning as for couples or families, but if you are single, it's the same thing. And like we said, it could be that maybe you are a parent, it could be that you are, a pet parent, but whatever
Yeah.
the case is, you want your wishes documented. And absolutely, like what Andres just talked about, a living will. If you were to get incapacitated in some way, who does the hospital call? I mean, what happens, right? It's just, there's all these things that happen, and Andres hit it right on the nose. We can't control everything, but we can be as proactive as possible to minimize the effects of certain things and to have the best outcome for ourselves. So Andres, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking some time to share with us a little bit about trust and will. Can you just let folks know how they can learn more about the product and the services? Where can they go?
Totally. Thanks, Leslie. Appreciate you having me on. So the website, it's just trustandwill.com. And Leslie, if you're kind of sending this out or on the notes, we do have a discount for your clients if they're interested in checking it out. But
Okay.
keep in mind, what's also really unique is we don't charge up front. So if you're like, estate planning is already complex enough as a thought for you,
Hmm.
and then online you're like, wait, what? We don't charge up front. We let you walk through the full process start to finish, and then even from the very beginning, schedule a call. We have
Great.
live member support. We don't outsource it. They're all my amazing colleagues out here out of San Diego. So we walk you through the process, and at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's a fit for you, that you're comfortable with the process. And most feedback that we get is, I'm so glad I got it done. It was so
Hmm.
much more simpler than I had imagined or what I had heard of. So we're here to help. We're here to serve. And I'm super grateful, Leslie, one, that you had me, and then two, really, that in your profession you're having these conversations,
Hmm.
because it's such an important part of the whole kind of holistic approach in your profession. So I commend you for that.
Thank you, thank you. But you know what, Andres? I forgot to ask you one of the most important questions. What does it cost? I forgot to bring that up. So we
Absolutely,
mentioned it's
absolutely.
not a couple $1,000s, but we didn't really mention what the price points are.
Yeah. So we have two products. One is a trust, and it's $499 for a married couple, $399 for one person, and there's a 10% discount available to your clients. And then for a will, it's $159 for a married couple or $89 for one person.
Yes. So I
There's
wanted to make sure
no
we caught that because
for
that is
sure.
a huge return on investment for yourself, for your family. Again, it's a huge cost savings. If you were concerned about the cost going to an attorney, or you just didn't feel like you needed or wanted to spend that much on an attorney, I think that the trust and will software really can handle, even if you are high net worth, unless you just have a super complicated situation, it really can also support you as well. So yeah, wanted to throw that in there. So how can people find you, Andres?
LinkedIn, Andreas Mazabel.
Okay.
Also, just search Trust and Will. You'll also find me on there. And then Twitter. I just started kind of venturing into Twitter. So same thing, just my name. But yeah, I love connecting with both advisors, individuals. Really, this is why I came to Trust and Will, is because I'm actually really passionate about the work that people like you are doing. And it's really impactful work that makes a big difference in everyday working families. So I love to connect with people. It's something I'm very passionate about.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Andres. And I'm glad that we could share this information, not only the importance of estate planning, but a tool that I think so many people can take advantage of and implement right away. I mean, it's really something you guys sit down, take a look at, and realize that you can really just finally get this estate plan that you've been putting off for so long. You can really finally get it started. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much for joining me, and we'll talk again
For
soon.
having me. This was great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate it.